The winter holidays are a special time when families come together, share warmth and joy, and exchange gifts under the sparkling Christmas tree. But there are also those who in this bright time see only an opportunity for unlawful enrichment, which sometimes leads to unforeseen consequences. The Harris family moved in the year 1986 to the small town of Dryden in the state of New York. The family head Tony was offered the position of sales manager in a Syracuse company that specialized in electronic equipment. In 15 years of work, he built an impressive career. Fulfilling his long-standing dream, Tony built a special house for his loved ones. With his wife, Dolores, he lived 17 happy years together. Their children, 15-year-old Shelby and 11-year-old Mark, attended the local school. By 1989, the family was completely integrated into the local community. Dolores, known for her cooking talent, often delighted the neighbors with homemade pastries. She was actively involved in the school board and in charity work. To expand her horizons, she opened a cozy souvenir and handicraft shop in a converted barn next to the house. Thanks to her open character, Dolores quickly found friends in Dryden. The entire Harris family led an active social life, was enthusiastic about sports, and tried not to miss any local events. The 22nd of December 1989 was the last school day before the Christmas holidays. After classes, Shelby spent time with her friend James. Around 3:30, she rode the bus with friends to her stop, only 10 walking minutes from home. With James, they arranged to meet later, around 7 in the evening. On the same day, Dolores' friend Rita came to the shop to buy holiday souvenirs. The shop was open, but the owner was not inside. A phone call to the house also remained unanswered. Surprised by the unlocked shop, Rita arranged with Dolores a delivery of the purchases for 6:30. Mark, the younger Harris, got off the school bus around 4 o'clock. The boy stayed with his friends for snowball fighting. About a quarter of an hour later, Dolores telephoned with her friend Anne and discussed an upcoming sports event. In the conversation, Dolores was, as usual, full of life and friendly. Tony was finishing his workday at this time. At 3:15, he left the office toward home. The drive usually took about 15 minutes. In anticipation of the holidays, he hurried home to see how his wife had decorated the house for Christmas. That evening at 6:30, Dolores waited in vain for her friend who had promised to bring purchases from the shop. A strange feeling of unease crept over her as the phone calls remained unanswered. The same situation arose with Shelby's friend. She was supposed to visit him at 7 o'clock, but did not appear. Despite numerous attempts to reach the Harris family by phone, the line was constantly busy. The young man did not attach special significance to this and assumed Shelby would simply be late and call back later. However, there were no messages from the family. The next morning, around 7 o'clock on the 23rd of December, the piercing tone of a fire alarm broke through the steady silence of the neighborhood. The neighbor of the Harris family, awakened by the alarm signal from the house across the street, waited some time hoping for a random false alarm. When the tone did not stop and no one responded to the ringing, the concerned man contacted the police. The arriving officer initially suspected an ordinary false alarm, as was common in the pre-Christmas period. The neighborhood was considered quiet. Incidents were rare here, especially on the eve of Christmas. However, unusual tire tracks on the driveway that crossed the lawn caught his attention. As he approached the house, the patrol officer heard the persistent alarm tone. No one answered, knocking and ringing. The first thought was the assumption of a domestic incident. Possibly one of the residents had an accident while cooking and had driven to the hospital independently. This would also explain the traces of hasty departure across the lawn. To check his version, the officer decided to enter through the unlocked garage. Inside, smoke and a sharp fuel smell greeted him. But the most disturbing sign were the severed cables of the house telephone. When inspecting the ground floor, the patrol officer found no one. In the living room stood a festive Christmas tree under which unopened Christmas gifts could be seen. In the bedroom of the family's eldest daughter, a disturbing scene presented itself to the patrol officer. After discovering Shelby, he immediately called for backup and continued searching the rooms. By the time rescue services and additional law enforcement officers arrived, 3 more people were found in the main bedroom on the first floor. The spouses had been immobilized on their bed, and the boy was located next to them. For immobilization, various improvised materials were used, ropes and even a wire hanger that held the spouses. On the heads of the three were pillowcases. Shelby was also tied to a chair with cables and a bent clothes hanger. The police officers discovered fragments of Shelby's dress for the school Christmas ball. It was torn and had been used for binding. The fire specialists determined that the fire was set intentionally. They discovered 3 fire sources in different rooms. The perpetrator attempted to destroy traces by means of fire. Fortunately, he did not succeed in completely eliminating the evidence. The experts collected much data that made it possible to reconstruct the events of that Christmas evening. Presumably between 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon of the previous day, someone broke into the house and threatened the entire family with a firearm. According to the investigator's assessment, he remained there until about 10:30. In the early morning, the perpetrator returned to erase traces, after which around 6:45 the fire arose. The fire alarm system reacted in time. The neighbor reacted quickly to the alarm signal and contacted rescue services already at 6:58. The fire experts determined that the alarm system was triggered almost immediately after the arson. Several containers with fuel were found in the house, plastic and metal canisters. The investigators suspected that the fuel came from the family's garage where the family head's supplies were stored. Throughout the house, numerous cigarette butts were found, although no one from the family could have left them. Obviously, they belonged to the perpetrator. Unfortunately, these were the only substantial evidence. The impression arose that the rooms were thoroughly cleaned. No fingerprints could be found. The examination of the crime scene proved to be little productive. Not even cartridge cases could be found. The perpetrator obviously proceeded methodically and tried not to leave traces that could lead to him. A peculiarity of the case complicated the work of the crime technicians. The traces were destroyed with fuel. On the doors, there were no signs of forced entry. Presumably, the family had let the stranger in themselves, which was common in this area where everyone knew everyone. The residents were accustomed to a quiet life and did not fear for their safety. Now, the atmosphere in the city had changed. People looked suspiciously at their neighbors and tried to understand who could have brought misfortune to the entire family. The Harris family was considered friendly and kind people without enemies. They led an exemplary life. No connections to the criminal world, no debts or dependencies. The spouses were faithful to each other and religious. They spent weekends together and actively participated in the children's school life and in the district's sporting events. In the morning, the investigators discovered the Harris family van. It was located in a parking lot 7 kilometers west of their house. Information arrived about the use of the family's bank cards at various ATMs in the city. On the 23rd of December, purchases were also made with these cards in several shopping centers, which helped determine the approximate time the perpetrator spent at the ATMs. At the end of the 80s, there was not yet a developed video surveillance system, so one had to rely on statements from eyewitnesses, especially from store employees. It turned out that with Tony Harris's card, a man paid 4 times, and with Dolores's card, a woman paid just as often. They stood out through large purchases: household appliances, electronics, underwear, clothing, and expensive jewelry pieces. Valuable information was provided by an employee of the household goods store. He remembered a strange customer who smelled strongly of gasoline and had oil stains on his pants. The salesperson helped create a composite sketch that was refined with the help of other witnesses. They searched for a dark-skinned couple, a man of about 30 years, medium build with curly hair, and a woman of about 50 years. The composite sketches were released to the public for the manhunt. On the same day, several reports came in. Particularly important proved to be the statement of a university professor who lived 1 kilometer from the crime scene. On the morning of the 23rd of December, he noticed the slowly moving van of the Harris family. In it sat a dark-skinned man and a woman who corresponded to the composite sketches. The professor recognized them as neighbors, mother and son. Further witness statements followed. People saw the suspects at ATMs, in stores, and mentioned the same names. Finally, the identity of the alleged accomplice was established. 55-year-old Shirley King, a law-abiding citizen. Her 33-year-old son Michael, also known as Anthony Turner, had a criminal past. In 1979, Michael was convicted of breaking and entering, but was already released on probation on the 19th of February, 1980. He settled with his girlfriend and his 2-year-old daughter in a duplex. In the other part of the house lived his mother. Before that, he had committed some offenses, but they had no serious consequences. By 1982, Michael was again taken into custody, this time for possession of a weapons arsenal. During his time in detention, he expressed his regret that he had not resisted the law enforcement officers. The young man had a rich criminal past, mainly break-ins to houses using firearms. Until the incident with the Harris family, there were no serious conflicts with people in his actions. Despite suspicions and witness statements, the investigators could not bring charges in connection with the family. The young man was placed under observation. The neighbors considered Michael and Shirley quite strange. In the 2 years of their stay in the duplex, they had hardly any contact with their surroundings. The house owner told that the couple owed $700 rent and $550 utilities shortly before the sad events. One day after the incident, they surprisingly found means to settle the debts. On the 26th of December, a certain Stephen May came to the police, who had known Michael since the end of the 70s. Stephen confessed that he was his partner in one of the Christmas valuables thefts. He described his acquaintance as someone who, like the Grinch, intentionally spoiled people's holidays. Every Christmas, he sought out an apartment or a house. According to Stephen's account, he visited his acquaintance the day after what happened, who showed him self-made equipment and modified devices. Stephen specified that the weapons arsenal was sold to Michael by a female friend back in January 1987. The characteristics matched the evidence from the crime scene. The presence of a silencer explained the silence that the Harris family's neighbors noticed. During this time, Michael's mother, Shirley, worked as a cleaning lady in a hotel. On the 30th of January 1990, an undercover investigator moved in there. His name was David Harding, a novice but promising investigator. He was distinguished by intelligence, persistence, and adherence to principles, which was conducive to his career development. The recent divorce made him throw himself headfirst into work. Friends joked he was now married to the service. Despite personal difficulties, he handled his official duties excellently and was ideally suited for the investigation in the case of the 2 dangerous perpetrators. Colleagues noticed Harding's special talent for finding evidence in the most difficult cases and discovering fingerprints where even experienced experts could not find them. By this time, he had already helped bring several dangerous lawbreakers to account who left practically no traces. He devoted special attention to the Harris family case. In October 1990, an undercover investigator settled in a hotel under the name David Savage. His goal was to make contact with Shirley. In the course of conversation, the woman shared her plans. She intended to move to her own property in the north of New York State, where she owned 200 acres of land. Shirley told of her intention to open a hospice for those in need. David, who introduced himself as a businessman with connections to government structures, offered support in obtaining funding for this noble undertaking. Such a proposal obviously interested the conversation partner and helped build a trusting relationship. During the conversations, the investigator noticed an interesting detail. Shirley reacted particularly emotionally to television news related to accusations against dark-skinned suspects. Another observation: she preferred a rare tobacco variety whose remains were found at the crime scene. David, who wore a cast for disguise, asked Shirley for help signing invitations to a class reunion. She willingly agreed and signed 25 envelopes, including one to the name Dolores. This name was not chosen randomly. It was planned to compare the handwriting with the signatures of a certain Dolores on credit card checks of missing persons. With a simple trick, the request for a glass of orange juice, the investigator obtained Shirley's fingerprints. In later conversations, the woman told about her children, Robert and Gabriel, who live in other states. Notably, she did not say a word about her son Michael King and his alternative names. To the question about previous problems with the law, Shirley reacted unusually but maintained her composure. Although it was previously reported that no fingerprints were found in the houses of the victims, Harding was convinced of the opposite. The search was simply not thorough enough. His assumptions were confirmed 2 days after meeting Shirley. On a canister from the Harris house, her fingerprint was discovered. This proved, together with other evidence, to be sufficient for bringing official charges against the suspects. On the 7th of February 1990, a special unit of law enforcement agencies went to Michael's duplex to conduct searches. It was known that an impressive arsenal was kept in the King's house. Given Michael's previous statements about his readiness for confrontation with police, a rescue helicopter was launched into the air as a precaution. Several paramedic teams were on standby in case of complications. When the unit entered the bedroom, they discovered the armed Michael on the bed. After the demand to cease resistance, he stood up abruptly and a bang was heard. Counterfire followed. Later, a fragment was found in the ceiling that confirmed the legitimacy of the investigators' actions. At this time, Shirley King was already in custody. In the part of the duplex where Michael lived, a workshop with workbench, machines, and tools was discovered. As his acquaintance reported, all this was used for manufacturing self-made equipment and sharp objects for sale. Throughout the house, specimens of these products were found together with ammunition. The investigators also discovered the young man's bicycle. Presumably, he used it to approach the Harris house inconspicuously. In the half of the duplex where his mother lived, they found cigarettes of the same brand as at the crime scene. The police confiscated a lighter that was bought on the day when the household goods store salesperson noticed a strange customer with a strong gasoline smell. During the search of Michael's room, modified assault equipment 22 was found. It corresponded to the description of the object that the suspect's acquaintance had reported about. The ballistic examination confirmed the connection of this object with the incident in the Harris house. During interrogation, Shirley insisted on her innocence and claimed the investigators were trying to accuse her groundlessly. She admitted that her son had given her a foreign credit card, but allegedly had not been interested in its origin. The woman denied the accusations and said it would have been unreasonable to bring misfortune to an entire family for a few $1,000s that she had spent with her son. Later, she changed her statement, admitted her son's actions, but insisted on not knowing anything about his intentions. Shirley told that she had learned about the incident with the Harris family from the news and asked her son about the cards. Michael confessed and explained his actions with fear of discovery, since the family could have identified him. According to Shirley's words, she reprimanded her son for what happened, but did not inform the authorities. However, a renewed investigation refuted her claims about her non-involvement. On one of the canisters, a small fingerprint was discovered that, according to Harding, belonged to Shirley. The investigators suspected that Shirley was not present during the incident with the family, but definitely appeared there later. Employed as a chambermaid in a hotel, she dealt professionally with cleaning rooms and could remove various stains. These skills presumably helped her to thoroughly clean the Harris house. At the beginning of August 1990, Shirley's case was brought to court. The prosecution raised 12 points, including aiding and abetting burglary, altering the crime scene, arson, possession of other people's property, and obstruction of investigations. On the 13th of August, the prosecutor expressed the suspicion of more serious involvement by Shirley, but due to lack of evidence, these charges had to be dropped. It is known that Michael's girlfriend lived in her duplex and was there at Christmas. At the hearing, she confirmed Shirley's alibi and told that her boyfriend drove somewhere twice without explaining where. His mother stayed with the young woman the entire evening. However, she suspected that the woman drove away together with Michael at night. According to the investigators, after the incident with the Harris family, she decided to help her son cover up the traces. The main prosecution witness was David Harding. His emotional testimony seemed to finally convince the jurors of Shirley's involvement. The jurors found her guilty on all counts: arson, trespassing, document forgery, obstruction of justice, and unlawful possession of other people's property. The sentence was 44 years, with the possibility of early release after 18 years. Before the jurors, Shirley confessed to using someone else's credit card, but insisted that she did not know its owner and had never been in the Harris house. She accused David Harding of manipulating evidence, bias, and intentional slander to close the case. These statements were ignored, but the story took an unexpected turn. At the beginning of 1991, David Harding underwent a lie detector test while trying to start with the CIA. He did not pass the question about Shirley King's case, which raised suspicion of possible evidence falsification. Upon verification, it turned out that the fingerprint allegedly found on the canister and attributed to Shirley had in reality never been seen by anyone. The experts who originally worked on the case confirmed that they had found nothing when examining the crime scene. David and his police colleague were presented with charges in several similar cases, including the unlawful persecution of Shirley. In November 1992, the case took an unexpected turn. Harding confessed to giving false testimony. The court sentenced him to 4.5 years in prison. The same sentence was also received by his police colleague, who knew about his colleague's actions and covered them up. This case became the starting point for a comprehensive review of the work of the New York police, which uncovered an entire system of similar violations. As a result, serious reforms of the working methods of the local law enforcement agencies were carried out. After Harding's confession, Shirley was released. She had spent about 2.5 years in custody. The woman confirmed her involvement in using other people's credit cards and document forgery, but she had already fully served the sentence for these offenses. Now Shirley decided to demand compensation for the moral damage suffered. She turned to the court, which sided with her. On the 13th of December 2007, the decision was made to pay her $286,000 from the state of New York. The court found that the city police department was responsible for negligence, insufficient supervision, and intentional violations. Shirley later confessed that she wanted to look Harding in the eyes during the trial when his unlawful actions were uncovered. She was certain that she would have seen lies and fear in his gaze. In the year 2015, Shirley died. She was 80 years old. At the same time, her son's guilt in the matter of the incident with the family was fully proven. He was indeed involved in what happened with the Harris family. It is assumed that it is safer in busy places and the chances of encountering difficulties there are much lower. Statistics confirm this, but evildoers can find ways to lure people to places where there are no witnesses. This story occurred in the Italian city of Andria. This place, with about 100,000 inhabitants, is known for its rich historical heritage. The city attracts many travelers, allowing the locals to successfully develop the tourism business and derive their main income from guests from around the world. The main attraction is the Castel del Monte. The Mansi family lived nearby. The spouses had a daughter, Graziela, their only and long-awaited happiness. Her parents also worked in the tourism sector. For about 10 years, they had owned a conveniently located trading shop on the way to the main gate of the castle, where they sold nuts and dried fruits. The family business brought a good income. Graziela constantly helped in her parents' shop and showed sincere interest in the business, which greatly pleased her relatives. Their business was located on a busy tourist route where there were always many visitors, and it became increasingly difficult to cope with the customer rush. Graziela's help came in very handy, especially since she herself enjoyed being part of the family business. With her friendliness and energy, she remained in the memory of many customers. On the 19th of August 2000, it was an ordinary Saturday with a large tourist rush. For the Mansi family, working on weekends was a familiar thing. On such days, Graziela's grandfather often stood behind the counter. The granddaughter gladly kept him company and carried out small errands. Because of the constant stream of visitors to the castle, the grandfather could not leave the shop. Around 7 o'clock in the evening, tired from work, he asked Graziela to go to the well and fill a small bottle with water. She readily agreed and set off. It took about 5 minutes to reach the well. Graziela did not return, which worried her grandfather. He did not want to leave the shop unattended and tried to calm himself with the thought that his granddaughter had simply met acquaintances and was engrossed in conversation. However, when more than 20 minutes had passed and Graziela still had not appeared, Mr. Mansi felt something was wrong. He decided to check the situation and went to the well. To his surprise, Graziela was nowhere to be found either on the way or at the well itself. The man searched all the surrounding streets, but the search remained unsuccessful. All of this seemed very strange. The grandfather returned to the shop, hoping that Graziela might have taken a different route, but she was not there. About half an hour after her disappearance, he contacted Graziela's parents and began calling all their acquaintances whose numbers he knew. The parents also called everyone they could reach, but no one had seen their daughter. Soon the whole family and some of Graziela's friends gathered in the square in front of Mansi's shop. Without losing time, the adults and young people divided into groups and began searching. The residents joined the search. The relatives took a photo of Graziela with them to show to passers-by. Some confirmed having seen a similar-looking person during the day and evening, but no one knew where she had gone and what happened afterward. It was a quiet area where silence normally prevailed. It seemed incredible that something could have happened in such a busy place. After several hours of fruitless searching, the Mansi family turned to the nearest police station to file a missing person report. The law enforcement officers took the situation seriously, and the Carabinieri immediately joined the search operation. After some time, a resident approached one of the patrol officers. He reported that he had heard disturbing sounds from the wooded area near Castel del Monte Castle. 2 officers headed in the indicated direction and noticed smoke rising from the center of a plantation. Although they did not connect this to the disappearance, they decided to check the source of the smoke and call the fire department if necessary. When the law enforcement officers approached the fire site to about 10 meters, they noticed that this was not an ordinary fire. The Carabinieri discovered under a layer of dry leaves something that caused them serious concern. The size and details of the clothing indicated that they had found the missing Graziela. When examining the adjacent forest area, several pieces of clothing and a lighter that was presumably used to start the fire were found. Further evidence that could have helped in searching for those involved in the incident was not found. The authorities planned to evaluate the recordings of several surveillance cameras near the castle. The medical examination confirmed that the person found was Graziela Mansi. However, due to the condition of the evidence, the expert could not provide complete answers to the questions of the investigators and relatives. The report stated that what happened was not an accident. The next day, press representatives began literally besieging the Mansi family. When the relatives were informed about what happened to Graziela, they initially could not grasp the reality of what had occurred. This unexpected incident shocked the residents so much that the entire area was in turmoil. The media actively spread information about the disturbing incident near the famous castle. The public was troubled by the situation. The tourist flow decreased significantly. Visitors considered these places unsafe and avoided the attractions, which significantly affected the tourism business in Andria. The investigators acted quickly. The main theory was that the perpetrator had led Graziela from the walking path to a secluded place. After that, he tried to eliminate all traces with fire. Given the circumstances, the authorities suspected that an adult person had to be sought. The investigators pursued several theories. First, they checked data on persons who had already attracted attention through similar actions and could be in the region. However, this theory became less and less convincing during the course of the investigation. The investigators examined various versions, including the possibility that it was the act of a traveler who happened to be in the area. The more the law enforcement officers spoke with witnesses and acquaintances of the Mansi family, the more frequently the name Pasquale Toro came up. He worked as an unofficial parking attendant on the same street where the Mansi's shop was located. Many residents noticed his strange behavior, especially when Graziela began helping her family in the business. Several witnesses noticed Pasquale's disturbing gaze with which he watched Graziela. The young man's friends confirmed these observations. Some of them even joked about Pasquale's special interest in Graziela. But after the incident, these words took on a completely different meaning. Pasquale's relatives rejected all suspicions. According to their words, he grew up in a good family and had never violated the law. Despite the assurances of his relatives, Pasquale became the main person in the investigation. At the first meeting with the investigators, their suspicions only intensified. Pascal wore a dirty t-shirt with suspicious dark spots, as if he had recently been digging in the earth. Pascal denied any involvement in the incident. However, the longer the investigators spoke with the young man, the more frequently the details of his story changed. After several hours of conversation at the police station, his confidence began to wane. The investigators were particularly concerned by his inappropriate remark about Graziela's appearance given her young age. Many inconsistencies accumulated in the stories of the alleged perpetrator, which indicated attempts to hide something from the police. In one version, Pascal claimed he had been in this forest by chance during a walk. According to his words, he had seen flames and ran away in fear, and shortly afterward the police appeared. Later, he supplemented the story and mentioned how he noticed Graziela at the well, where she wanted to fetch water. He approached her, and she was not frightened of him, since she had often seen him before. Until that day, he had always seemed like a calm person. Pascal told that he had spoken to her about puppies that had allegedly recently been born in the forest. When the young man finally confessed, he admitted to having lured Graziela into the forest. He insisted that his goal had been a game that got out of control, and not what he was originally accused of. The media actively reported all details of the incident, but added speculation and unverified particulars. This caused confusion, while the true reasons for the act remained unclear. After many contradictory statements, Pasquale's story took a new turn. The law enforcement representatives wanted to hear the true version. In his narrative, there were many inconsistencies and obvious lies that did not match the evidence found. It was established that the fire began around 22 o'clock, although Graziela had disappeared almost 3 hours earlier. The reason for the arson was voices. Pasquale heard people near the forest. He assumed that the search for the missing person had begun. The medical examiner's conclusions caused particular concern that Graziela still showed signs of life at the time the fire broke out. The Carabinieri continued to pressure the suspect. It was surprising that in such a serious incident he only had small scratches on his face. Suspicions arose that he had not acted alone. It was decided to conduct another interrogation. Finally, Pasquale agreed to cooperate with the investigators and promised to tell the whole truth, which he had previously concealed out of fear. According to Pasquale, the events developed quite differently than the investigators thought. He told that he had gotten into this situation through a group of older friends. Giuseppe Di Bari, Vincenzo Caratello, Domenico Margiotto and Michele Zagaria were waiting in the forest. Pasquale claimed that he had originally planned nothing evil. He had had an argument with these acquaintances, which he lost. As compensation, they demanded that he bring Graziela to the forest. When they heard the voices of people searching for Graziela, the group panicked. Out of fear of the consequences, they decided to eliminate the traces of the incident. Since they found no other means, they used a lighter. After several attempts, they succeeded in covering the traces with the help of foliage and fire. All participants in the incident were young people. It was noteworthy that they came from wealthy families. which made their action particularly incomprehensible to society. Acquaintances described this group as quiet and reasonable young people. They were never observed to have a tendency toward legal violations. Only one of them had once committed a small theft. Therefore, the news about their involvement in such a serious incident seemed incredible. After Pasquale told about his friends, the police quickly arrested them. This news shook all of Italy. All media reported about it. Since their arrest, the suspects denied any connection to the incident and wondered why they had attracted the attention of the authorities at all. However, the investigators persistently continued their work and tried to clarify all the details of that evening in the forest. Unlike Pasquale, these young men had clean clothes without traces and damage. Searches of their houses revealed nothing suspicious. They continued to claim that Pasquale Tortora indeed had strange feelings for Graziela, but they themselves had nothing to do with what happened. Despite long interrogations, none of the suspects confessed guilt. Finally, they were provisionally released. The young people went home, but remained under observation by the authorities. It is noteworthy that these four participated in the farewell ceremony for Graziela, which took place before Pasquale's confession. Witnesses noticed their sincere tears, as if they truly sympathized with the loss. During interrogations, the young men explained their emotions by saying they knew Graziela. Although they rarely spoke with each other, they often saw her in the Mansi family store. The ceremony gathered almost the entire city and even outsiders, so the four crying young men remained unnoticed in the crowd. When they were summoned again for questioning, the investigators spoke with each one individually. Vincenzo and Giuseppe claimed they had proof of their innocence. According to their statements, they were at the municipal game club around 7 o'clock that evening. Michele and Dominic refused to speak with the investigators and demanded legal assistance, which only intensified the police's interest in them. At this time, the investigators could only verify the statements of Vincenzo and Giuseppe. The computer club confirmed that the friends were indeed there, but left the establishment after about an hour. For the remaining time, no reliable confirmation of their whereabouts was found. Unexpectedly, Michelle and Dominic decided to tell the truth. They largely confirmed the story of Pasquale Tortora. According to their account, the friends had called them to the forest that evening, as they put it, to play with fire. When they arrived at the location, they found that the entire group was already assembled. Pasquale took on the role of decoy and chose Graziela, for whom he had a strange interest according to acquaintances. The others hid behind trees and waited for their target to appear. Pasquale confirmed that he met Graziela at the well where she was getting water. He offered her to look at newborn puppies in the nearby forest. The trusting Graziela, who had a special love for animals, joyfully agreed without suspecting the approaching treachery. She trusted the familiar young man and could not imagine such betrayal. The forest area was not far from their meeting point, about 15 to 20 minutes walk. At this time, the grandfather had probably already begun searching for his granddaughter. When they reached the designated point, the other participants suddenly emerged from their hiding places. Graziela fell into a trap and recognized this too late. The already intoxicated young people continued drinking. According to the statements of those arrested, they had no premeditated intentions. They only wanted to play with the helpless Graziela and frighten her. Graziela was under such shock that she barely understood what was happening. The young people claimed that they originally had not planned any further actions, but when she showed no more signs of life, this made them realize the seriousness of the situation. At this moment, they heard voices and panicked, thinking someone was searching for her. Possibly due to alcohol influence, they decided to cover the traces of their actions with fire. The statements of the suspects were partially confirmed by the results of the investigation. The experts could not find clear evidence of certain actions. Graziela still wore part of her clothing. Although some injuries were determined, their cause could also have been different. On the other hand, the condition of the found Graziela was such that final conclusions were impossible. The Carabinieri suspected that part of the evidence might have been destroyed, as intended by the young people. The story with the game made the investigators doubt. The law enforcement agencies searched for ways to confirm the true circumstances of the incident based on the available evidence. Meanwhile, those arrested continued to claim that everything had been an accident. It was decided to determine the degree of responsibility of each participant in court. Two from the group, Vincenzo and Giuseppe, denied their involvement. According to their statements, they had simply come to the forest on Pasquale's invitation without knowing his intentions and were shocked by what happened. They claimed to have quickly left the crime scene because they did not want to be witnesses. However, these young men also did not suspect the consequences of the dangerous situation. They did not dare to inform the authorities, fearing revenge from the other participants as well as possible legal consequences in case of charges for complicity. Despite the contradictions in the statements, Pasquale Tartora received a relatively mild sentence after the completion of the court proceedings, 30 years imprisonment. Two main factors contributed to this. First, his willingness to cooperate with the investigation. From the entire group, he was the first to make contact with law enforcement agencies. Second, all the expert opinions conducted indicated that he was not the main initiator of the incident. Although he was involved in the incident, the investigators were convinced that the main actions were carried out by the other four. They expected a harsher punishment. The court found them guilty of Graziela's disappearance and sentenced them to the highest possible punishment, lifelong solitary confinement. This meant they would spend their entire remaining time behind bars without contact with other inmates. When the verdict was read, Graziela's mother lost consciousness. Her husband tried to bring her back to consciousness. A fight broke out between the families of the accused. Graziela's relatives considered the verdict just, except for the decision regarding Pasquale. In their opinion, he received too mild a punishment for luring their daughter into the forest. The harsh verdict most outraged Vincenzo and Giuseppe. They continued to protest their innocence. Their persistence even gained supporters who believed their version. Nevertheless, this did not help them challenge the verdict. 8 years passed. Vincenzo Caratello, who had turned 27 years old, made an irrevocable decision in prison. On the 19th of June 2013, lawyer Michel filed an application for review of the case, citing procedural violations. He did not agree with the decision made, but the court rejected his application. Pasquale's mother publicly addressed the Mansi family. She asked for forgiveness for her son's deed and expressed her conviction that he must serve his just punishment. But Graziela's mother rejected this apology. She answered sharply that Pasquale should experience everything that her daughter had to go through. According to her words, nothing would have happened if he had not lured Graziela into the forest. Therefore, the parents blamed him above all. The name Graziela Mansi remains unforgotten in Italy to this day. At Castel del Monte Castle stands a memorial plaque with her photo and her story. Locals and tourists often lay flowers and toys there. This place is visited especially frequently by Graziela's relatives. After 24 years, Pasquale Tortora was released from prison. Due to good conduct, his sentence was reduced by 6 years. Today, he is a 44-year-old man who has decided to begin a new life. It is hard to say whether he will achieve this goal. Of all those involved, only he received the right to a shortened procedure, which led to a reduction in punishment. After the incident, the whole group broke off contact. Even when Pasquale was released, the relationships did not improve. Pasquale says that he thinks every day about what happened and the pain he caused Graziela and her relatives. He claims that if he could return to the past, he would act differently. Graziela's mother expressed herself about Pasquale's early release. In her opinion, with his release, the feeling of justice disappeared. She is convinced that such people do not change and pose a danger to society, which is why they should not get a second chance. Vincenzo and Giuseppe did not understand why Pasquale treated them this way and persisted in his innocence. Before Vincenzo decided on a desperate step, he left a message. In it, he continued to insist on his innocence and was outraged about the injustice of their situation. He hoped that in the future someone compassionate would confirm his words, while he himself refused to continue fighting for his freedom. Giuseppe, Dominic, and Michel are still in custody. Giuseppe holds fast to his claim of innocence and devotes his time to Bible study. He has accepted the imposed verdict and is not filing an appeal. In doing so, he sincerely believes that he will be released as soon as the truth about his non-involvement in the incident comes to light. His defender and his relatives share this belief, as well as in the innocence of the deceased Vincenzo. They all continue to point to Pasquale as the main person responsible for what happened. According to their statements, it was he who lured the victim into the forest thicket and committed the terrible act. This version is supported by the fact that only Pasquale showed signs of struggle, and scratches and dirt and traces of the incident were found on his clothing. The other participants showed no such characteristics. Nevertheless, Pasquale received the mildest punishment and is already free again.